Hello. The next article we're discussing is called Recognizing Jesus. And this is a really fun one for me because there's some really neat stories in the Bible about those who were able to recognize Jesus and those who didn't, and what the critical difference is between them. And this is important for us today because when God does new things, when there's new moves of God, the question that the old order always asks is this from God? But there is a way to tell. Jesus says in John 10 that my sheep know my voice. And so when we look at these stories, we can see what it is, what factors it was about the people who were able to recognize Jesus. So if we start from the beginning of the Gospels, we see that there is the story of the wise men who came from the east. And they not only recognized Jesus, they knew he was coming, they sought him out, and they worshipped him as an infant. That's recorded in Matthew 2, that they not only recognized that Jesus was the Messiah, but recognized him as God in human flesh. There's also the story in Luke 2 about Simeon and Anna in the temple who recognized Jesus as a baby when Mary and Joseph brought him there. Now, Anna was a prophetess, and the Bible records what it was that she did that made her so able to recognize Jesus. The Bible says that she never departed from the temple, but spent all her time there fasting and praying. So you have an image of someone who is spending a lot of time with God. And because she's spending so much time with him, she recognizes him when he appears. Now, fast forwarding a little bit to when Jesus began his ministry, we see that the disciples recognized him pretty early too. And we commonly think of them as just mere fishermen, but when we read John 1, we learn some more about them, that they weren't just fishermen, they were actually closely tied to John the Baptist. In fact, Andrew, who was Peter's brother, was one of John the Baptist's disciples. And so Andrew was there when John the Baptist pointed out Jesus and gave testimony about who he was. And he went and found his brother Peter and said, "We found the Messiah." So when we see these first disciples being called, Andrew, Peter, John, and James, and the Bible says that Jesus called them, they were in their boats, and they jumped right out and left and followed him, there's actually a little bit more to that story, that these were young men who were very, very diligent about seeking God, and they recognized Jesus from the very beginning of his ministry. Now fast forward a little more, and the Bible records that Jesus healed everybody. He healed everyone that was brought to him, and he was raising the dead, and they had that testimony, and no one could contradict it, yet the religious leaders of their time refused to accept him, refused to acknowledge him as the Messiah. And this bears some thinking about, because these were not pagans. This was the most religious society that ever existed on earth, more than we are today. These are men who gave away 10% of their income, who helped the poor, who fasted and prayed 2 times a week, who prayed in public, who knew that it was the time of the Messiah. They knew from Daniel that the Messiah would be coming around this year. And they knew from John the Baptist that the Messiah was on his way. And they saw the miracles, and yet they still couldn't believe. Jesus says some harsh things about it, but things that are true. In John 10, he points out to them that they are not his sheep, so they can't believe. And in John 8, he tells them that they are unable to receive his words. Luke 19 records another story where Jesus comes to Jerusalem and weeps over the city and talks about how, because they didn't recognize the time of his coming, it was now hidden from their sight. And he starts to prophesy about the Roman invasion and what would happen to these people, which happened 40 years after his death. So when we learn the lesson of these stories and we think about the critical difference, the difference is that his sheep know his voice. And those who are spending time with the Lord, spending time in fellowship with Him, engaged in righteousness, who have their hearts set on God, have a lot easier time recognizing God when He appears. And so in this new season, when new wine is released and the old wineskins can't receive it, there is a way to know what is from God and what's not. And we don't have to worry about whether or not we're being deceived if we already know Jesus. Thank you.